so thank you for joining us for our next episode of Got 10 Minutes. And we are joined by Cardigan's go-to games guy, Jesse Harris. Hello. So Jesse, before we get started, I have one question for you. You got 10 minutes?
Absolutely, for you, Harold.
Oh, thank you. All right. So before we get started, tell all of our viewers a little bit about yourself, where you work, what you do, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm Jesse Harris, and I'm one of the directors of people for Virgin Orbit, People and Culture, and I lead learning, engagement, culture, all of that work for Sir Richard Branson's rocket company. I also am an instructor for Stanford Continuing Studies, where I teach a class on game design with Laura Pickle, and how we use games for change and to help motivate people. I also run a website called myjobis.fun, myjobis.fun.com, and we give tips and tricks on how to incorporate elements of fun into workplaces. So I'm really centered around fun, games, and believing that work doesn't have to be a four-letter word, you know?
Yeah, I love that. And I'm sure people always see me sharing your stuff on LinkedIn, because when we need ideas, you're such a great thought partner. And I just really want to know, how did gamification and games become your thing? How did you get interested in that?
Yeah, well, I'm a designer by practice, so I obviously enjoy playing games. That's a really a big piece of it. But I love taking elements of these sort of disparate ideas, things that I enjoy in the real world, and then how do we incorporate those into business and into productivity and change. And so really for me, one of the aha moments was in an escape room that I did, maybe 5 or 7 years ago. And I thought, gosh, this would be an awesome team building activity, a way to sort of debrief behavior. And so it was really a sort of a eye-opening moment. And then that led me to, actually elements of pandemic are kind of interesting, or and how can we incorporate that into change and into things that I'm doing in the learning and development world or in the culture world.
Yeah, so I love this. You talked about, I think we've actually talked about this sort of escape room, right? And this idea, which I think is really cool. So what are some ways that it can be applied? Is it specifically training? Is it leadership, team building? Is it onboarding? Is it all of those things?
Yeah, what I love about it is it's a simulation when you think about it. You are stepping into this world where, where you're asking people to work with people that they may not normally work with, solving puzzles that are sort of halfway solved, and with rules of the game that aren't always clear. And when I think about that, that really maps to a lot of the challenges we have with onboarding, for example. So at our rocket company, we have lots of people who are going to have to come in on day one and work with people they've never worked with before, solving puzzles that are halfway solved at our rocket factory, and with rules of the game that maybe aren't clear to what they experienced at their previous job. And so that's a really nice simulation, and how you show up for that escape room might be similar to how you'll show up on day two when you're asked to work with other people. So if you're someone who in the escape room goes, I don't understand this, I'm going to be hands off, that might be how you show up on day two, and that may not be the best way to show up. So we want to help people become aware of those things. And so it's a perfect example of how you can use a game to bring attention to something.
Yeah, we might want to include it in the interview process. It sounds like, right? Okay. So, are there one or two principles for our viewers? If they're kind of new to this and they're thinking about it, one or two things you would tell them as principles that you live by when it comes to games and games to teach and learn?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there are probably two tips. So I get this question quite a bit. There are probably two tips that I would give people. One is to be really clear about what your learning challenge is, or your change challenge. What is the thing that you're trying to do? So oftentimes we see people will add a little digital badge. If you complete a course, you get this digital badge, and it doesn't really mean anything because it's largely disconnected from what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to get people to become aware of potentially dysfunctional behaviors in themselves, then you're going to design to that thing. So with the escape room, we've designed to address that. So getting really clear about that. A crossword puzzle isn't going to help someone have this realization about their, internal, the things that they bring to a team. So being really clear with that. And then number two, the second thing is, beg, borrow, and steal. Some of the best things that we've come up with are actually just adaptations of games that exist in the real world. The escape room uses a lot of the same mechanics that an escape room that you would go pay to participate in does. So those would be the two things that I'd recommend.
Awesome. And I even remember one of the things that you introduced us to was kind of the history game. And it really kind of took me back to thinking of games that kids play because they're kind of easy, and they're fun. And there's a certain level of competitiveness. One of the things we used was like Cahoots. And I don't know if you all have ever used that or not, but that was super fun. And we've done it in team meetings, and like people are standing up and like yelling at the computer screen, hoping that their team, wins, but kind of learning something along the way. So I think those two principles are great: beg, borrow, and steal.
For sure. Timeline, the game that you mentioned, is a really good one, so I'd recommend people check that out. It's a way to build a timeline to help people understand facts in context of sequencing, which is something that's a real challenge. When you have someone who's joining a rocket company who may not know the history, 100 years of aerospace that came before it, that's a great game that you can model and adapt. And there are tons of others. Kahoot is a great one. Bingo. I mean, there's so many good examples that you can borrow from and use the mechanics in your design, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, and because I think in most situations at work, you try not to reinvent the wheel, right? You research, you benchmark, and then you improve and adapt for your organization. So I always love to ask everyone this question: has there been something that, when it was presented to you, you were like, that's probably not going to work, or you actually thought there's no way this is going to work, but once you rolled it out in the organization, you actually had a lot of success with it?
Yeah. Gosh, so many examples. So I work with engineers, technicians, people who are very technical, but at a company like Virgin, which is known for being fun and hip and different and service oriented, and most of our employees don't interact with customers on a daily basis. Unlike at Virgin America, where I worked previously, where everybody interacted with customers. So it's a really different dynamic. And so as I'm thinking about things like our classes that deal with teaching about customers and our customer focus, I thought, gosh, engineers aren't going to be terribly interested in this. This is going to be, not really attended. It's not going to be as much fun for them because it's not technical. And what I found was actually they love that information because it gave a sense of purpose to what they're doing, and that this little piece of a rocket that I spend months and months designing is actually allowing us some additional capacity. That means that we can now serve this customer who is helping to track anti-poaching efforts, or that's helping with climate change. Like, people really gravitate to that, and that was a big aha for me, that it's the value of prototyping. We didn't go build this giant big class about customer service. We started with just a small piece in our orientation, and it's really grown to be one of the things that I think people really enjoy.
And, I've told you this before, like every time I'm working on something, I hear you in my head saying, hey, it's just a prototype. Get something out there, try it. And so I want to tell you, thank you for that, because that helps me get out of trying to make all of these things perfect. But I do want to say, are there some things that you've done? I mean, just considering, the current environment and people working from home, I think you share with me some of the cool things that your organization is doing, that maybe games you guys are playing involving, our four-legged friends and all that good stuff that maybe our viewers would love to hear and learn about.
Yeah, so on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, when we're at work, we offer lunch for our people. And it's a great time for people to come together around kind of like the common, the water.
By the way.
Sure. And anyway, it's really awesome. So we've decided to do a series called Chew on This, which is bringing people together to, again, sometimes play games, sometimes hear a talk, sometimes bring their four-legged friends in we played Best in Show. And it's a really low stakes way to bring people together and provide some connection. And that's what we all need in this time.
Awesome. So Jesse, we're about to run out of time, but I want everyone to know where they can find you. So give us your information.
Yeah, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Jesse Harris 15 at LinkedIn. I'm also at myjobis.fun or myjobisfun.com for all kinds of tips and tricks and cool ideas and all that stuff.
Awesome. Well, you are an amazing guest, an amazing friend and thought partner, and appreciate you so much. So everyone, follow Jesse Harris. All right. Thanks for joining the show.
Thanks, everybody.